it's disturbing. I mean, we're sick and tired of it.
A gun's gonna get you one or two places. It's gonna get you in prison, or it's gonna get you in the cemetery. What we gotta do is change the hearts and minds of these young people who are out here with guns.
Well, thank you for joining us for our special edition of Watch Fox, our town hall on gun violence in the Midlands. I'm your moderator, Friendly Clairvaux. Within the past 3 months, our area has seen a number of shootings, many deadly and some not. A good portion of those shootings involve young people. Back on March 8th, 14-year-old TREVION Fuller was shot and killed in a wooded area at ARCADIA Park Apartments. Authorities tell us 4 teenagers were arrested in this case and faced charges in his murder. On March 13th, a 20-year-old JAMAICA Dowling was shot and killed at the Green Crossing Apartments during a party. Surveillance video you see here showing people running for their lives. Authorities say an argument led to gunfire, which spilled into the hallway, and outside of the building, 4 other people were injured. On Saturday, April 16th, one day before Easter Sunday, chaos unfolding where 3 men opened fire at Columbiana Mall. 14 people were injured, including some who were shot while they were trying to get to safety. All these 3 men have been charged and arrested in the shooting. Then, on April 29th, 24-year-old TIANA Jones was shot and killed while visiting friends at the LATIMER MANOR apartments. According to reports, investigators are continuing to interview witnesses, and ballistic evidence from the crime scene has been processed. And just this past weekend, a 6-year-old, Winston Hunter was killed in a drive-by shooting in Orangeburg County. Investigators say someone drove along McLean Street and started shooting into a home, killing him while he was playing. Authorities are still looking for the shooter in this deadly incident. Tonight's town hall will focus on accountability, how to keep our communities safe, and addressing the mental health aspects of gun violence. We will hear from law enforcement agents, community members, a mental health counselor, a student, and family members who lost loved ones to gun violence. Our Brian McConkey is standing by with a victim of gun violence. We'll hear her story in just a minute. Brian is also fielding any questions that you may have on social media. Joining us now is Sheriff Leon Lott of Richland County Sheriff's Department, Bishop of Word of God Church and Ministries and founder of Recreation Athletics, Eric Warren Davis, and Columbia Police Chief Skip Holbrook. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this segment.
Thank you.
A few seconds there, Sheriff Lott, we played a soundbite, and our viewers heard from you in the beginning. You mentioned the need to change the hearts of young people. How do you suppose that we do that?
Well, we've got to teach them that what they're doing now is not real life, that a gun's going to get you 1 or 2 places, either in the cemetery or in prison, but they're not being taught that. You know, in their minds and their heart, they think that gun gives them power, gives them respect. And they're just inundated with our video games they play, the music they listen to, their heroes who glorify violence. That's not real life. And so we've got to teach them the difference between right and wrong, and we've got to reach them at a young age. We're losing way too many young people, and I think everything that you just showed, that age group is between 14 and 28. We're losing a generation there.
Mm-hmm. Bishop Eric Davis, you are familiar with all of this. You deal with a lot of gun violence, with gangs. You're very active in the community with that. What's the missing link? Why are some of these individuals choosing a life of crime?
Love. I think that what Sheriff said was right on point. He kind of spoke in my lane. You know, their job is law enforcement. I think our job is love enforcement. And that happens everywhere. That happens in the home, that happens in the school, that happens in the community. Definitely should happen in the church. And I think that the accountability goes in multiple directions. It's not just pointed at these young people. We all have to take some personal responsibility in this. And like Sheriff said, we have to teach them, but the question is, who are the we? And I think that a lot of times when we say we or we say they, I think most of the time we're not saying we, we're saying they need to do it, but it really should be we. And that's where the real issue, I believe, is.
Chief Holbrook, many times when we have these conversations, everyone begins to say law enforcement is not doing enough. Kind of piggybacking off what Bishop said, what do we do from this standpoint?
I think we've got to flip the conversation. I think we do hear all the time, what are the police going to do? And you know, we have a significant breakdown of family, personal ownership of the problem. You know, I'm going to tell you a couple of numbers, and I'll tell you what they represent. 397, 72, 5,500. 397 is the number of people shot in Columbia, just in the city. And the sheriff would tell you similar numbers in the county. 72 of those were fatal. And just in the last, just under 3 years, we've had ShotSpotter over 5,500 rounds fired in just a small portion of our city. So it's even beyond the person carrying a gun, shooting a gun, a lack of accountability. The impact of that gun being fired, our young children see it. Our older family members see it. Neighborhoods are destroyed. Lives are lost, and it's so far-reaching, and it is far beyond just law enforcement. We're using some of the greatest technology ever invented to prevent and solve crime, but it still comes down to that human making that decision to pull the trigger, and then it comes down to a lack of accountability and ownership of once they do that.
Speaking about that accountability piece, Bishop Davis, you deal a lot with parents. You counsel a number of individuals and people. What do you think is the issue? Are parents not involved, or are children just apathetic?
It's a sliding scale. When you say parents, if you looked at, you can have 3 to 4 generations in one home, and they start now very young. You can have a 50-some-odd-year-old grandmother with a 30-some-odd-year-old mother, with a teenage child, and potentially a 4th generation with a baby, all in the same house. And the accountability that we would expect the parent to give, they may have never received. That's one of the things that we're discovering. The life skills, the kind of family skills that we've lost over the course of a generation are now showing up, and they're showing up in multiple succeeding generations, because these people, like when we were young, we all had to go to Sunday school. We all had to go to church. We're now finding that there are a number of people who have spent their lives, they're in their 50s, and they've never gone to church. So the moral slide, the value slide, the callousness, and now everybody's being educated by rap music, by R&B, by television, media, movies, and their value systems have changed now. So when you talk about affecting the child, many times you have to affect the parent that affects the child. And that can be a daunting task if the parent is unwilling to go through that process.
Sheriff, what programs are available for parents who may feel as if I need help?
We have parent support groups. Our youth service division has parent support groups. We understand that we've got people with kids who don't know how to be a parent, so we try to teach them how to be a parent. And we have a support group that other parents come in and talk to them and do it as a team together. Everyone accomplishes more. So we join forces with that parent who needs that help, and we help them be that parent. Tell them they have to keep their child accountable. Kids want rules. That's the way you show that you love your child, is by setting rules. Just letting them run free and be their best friend is not going to raise them the right way. You got to be a parent. That's what you know what they're doing, who their friends are. There's no privacy. There's no privacy for that child. They didn't buy that phone. They didn't pay for that house. You do. So, but that's how you show and love them. And the bishop talked about earlier about love. Every child wants 2 things. That's love and attention. And if they don't get it at home, they're going to get it somewhere else, which may be bad. And that's where your gangs and your violence come in. They provide what they're not getting at home. Somebody bad is going to provide it. And then that child, that young person, is going to go down the wrong path.
So Chief Holbrook, we're talking about the different programs. There are a number of mentoring programs. Just by research here in Columbia, you could type up after-school programs, mentorship programs. So where's the breakdown? Are parents not knowing where they can go to find the help?
I think we do a very good job messaging, through our different civic groups. Throughout the year, we're coming into the summer. We know idle time leads to problems with our young folks, especially our young adults. We work very closely with the Urban League to provide summer internships and summer job programs. That not only gives us an opportunity to provide a job that pays a wage, but it also allows us, and the reason we participate in it is to interact with these young adults and to humanize the badge a little bit. They get to see us as fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters, more than just a police officer maybe showing up for a call for service. And I think that program is very important for us to invest in every year, and we look forward to it every year.
Bishop Davis, with you being a boots on the ground with a lot of young people and parents, what is it about, I guess, the gun culture that appeals to a lot of young people? What do you hear when you talk to them?
America has a gun culture. I mean, that's just the reality of it. We have an arsenal that's greater than most armies in the world. We love our guns. And unfortunately, that's not just in rap videos, that's, advocates of, the Second Amendment all the way down. And that's why I go back to the love issue. We have to value life more. I think we've become a little too callous. We're loving our weapons more than we love people. And because that is the climate, the atmosphere, everybody gets saturated with it one way or the other. If you look at most of our movies, and it doesn't have to be rap movies, you can rarely watch a movie without some form of killing, some form of shooting. And it creates a callousness. When you look at that kind of murder over and over again, we talk about the kids with the video games, but we're really seeing the same things. I think years ago, I think it was in the 90s, where they showed an actual murder on television, but because people have been so desensitized by television murders, it had no effect. It made it desensitized. It made us callous. So I think that it's a broader approach to it. I think that what happens is when we have a situation like the mall shooting that captures everybody's attention, it's on national news. But when that 6-year-old child is in a house, on a porch, in an impoverished community, we see it and we move right past it on the news. It doesn't affect us. And it has to get to the point where every killing, every shooting, no matter where it is, affects us at a heart level.
Sheriff, a lot for you, but being a Richland County Sheriff for quite some time, how are you able to process these deaths day in and day out, day in and day out?
It's difficult. It's very difficult for us to see young people dying. And it impacts our deputies, impacts all of us. We're part of this community. We're not the community. We're just part of our community. So when we see a young person that's been killed, we realize that family is going to suffer. But also the shooters, we got to realize too, their family is going to suffer. Just today we announced where a 16-year-old had been killed, shot and killed by 3 16-year-olds and an 18-year-old. That is 5 families right there that are suffering.
Yeah.
And that pain is not going to go away for them. But it doesn't go away for the deputies and investigators who work the cases. Their fathers, their mothers, their brothers, their sisters, they see that. And so, but we also understand we can't quit. We've got to go out. And we had 32 murders in Richland County last year. We solved 32 murders. Solving murders is not the problem, it's preventing them. And that's where the community comes involved. Chief Holbrook and I, our people are doing our jobs, but we have to get more of the community involved. That village needs to stand up strong and tall right now, and let's start raising our kids. If the parents can't do it and they need help, then the village, which is all of us, needs to step in.
We're going to go ahead and continue this conversation. Our Brian McConkey is standing by with someone directly affected by gun violence. Brian?
Yeah, Friendy, you talked about so many of those names and faces in the open of our show, and I know some people watching just probably think that that's a story to all of us. We don't forget any of those faces. Sheriff Lott doesn't forget any of them. Chief Holbrook doesn't forget any of them. The pastor doesn't forget any of them. And the people affected by them certainly don't forget any of them either. I'm standing by here with Tia Butler. She lost her daughter just weeks ago in one of those shootings that you mentioned at the beginning. This is still so fresh for you.
Yes,
it wasn't even a month ago at this point. And you are the family that's left behind. You're the ones they're talking about. And where are you at that in the point of realizing you got that terrible phone call?
I'm just trying to figure out why. It's just hard to believe.
Yeah. It's a question that probably none of us have a good answer to.
Mm-hmm.
Just a promising young woman was with friends that night, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about your daughter.
And she was like friendly, talking, joking with people, making them laugh. I don't understand why somebody would do that to her.
As we hear the pastor, the sheriff, the chief talk about the community being involved in this, you've had some time to think now, a few weeks. What would you say to people that are getting involved in this kind of stuff, that are picking up a gun?
Leave the guns alone, because you end up getting in trouble.
And still trying to solve that case. I mean, you feel probably somebody out there watching right now.
Yeah, somebody knows
exactly
something.
what happened. What would you say to them?
If you know something, tell it. Because my baby is gone and I can't get her back.
It took a lot of courage for you to come on to share about this. It's still so very fresh. But every one of these faces behind us here represents somebody that's been lost to gun violence. Your daughter included in these group of photos behind us. But Freddie, that's just one of those people that's affected by this, standing right here in our studio right now, and it is difficult to hear, without a doubt. I'll send it back to you now and the panel.
It's heartbreaking, and you could hear the mother there, the gentleman that's on the panel. You could hear the anguish. One of the things that she talked about is if anybody knows something, to please call. As law enforcement agents, kind of speak to this notion of no one wants to say anything because they don't want to be a snitch. Does that affect you all?
Well, I think the sheriff mentioned that our homicide solvability rates are good, and I think we are seeing the pendulum switch a little bit, and we're seeing improvements. But we really focus on our non-fatal shootings because we know that's creating a shooting cycle. And if somebody survives that gunfight, they want to retaliate. And the only way we can break that cycle is through, scientifically, through technology, or through witnesses, somebody that'll cooperate and say, that person came into my neighborhood and shot a gun and shot somebody. And we are seeing some improvement, but that, to me, we've hit critical mass, and that's what's got to change. Because most of the violent crime that we see is perpetrated by somebody that's not from the neighborhood. They're coming into that neighborhood and they're inflicting that pain and suffering on that neighborhood, and that's a point of significant frustration for us, is when we see that they're not from there, as they say, and yet there's still reluctance to to cooperate with law enforcement. And we don't even ask we don't need a name from somebody cooperating. We just want them to say that's who you need to be looking at, and let us take it from there.
What are some things, Sheriff, that you all have implemented to kind of help you all with this? We know that there's Shot Spotter, for instance, that kind of helps that, but what are some other things that you all have implemented to deal with the uptick in violence?
We'll build relationships with our young people. Our school resource officers, we have 97 school resource officers. They're in the schools when kids start in kindergarten, building that respect, mutual respect, and building that relationship. So, we're teaching them also what real life is about. So we have to build great relationships with our kids, and so we put a lot of emphasis on that. As Chief Holbrook said, the technology's there, investigative techniques there. We just got to reach these kids, and that's what we do through our youth services program, our school resource officers, our community action team. All of our deputies are tasked to go out and build relationships with these kids. Teenagers, speak to them, just stopping and having a word with them. And also having a department that reflects the community, I think, is very important. And so diversity in your agency helps out a lot. If somebody sees someone that looks like them, they're more readily able to talk to them than they might not be if it was opposite. So having a good department like that really helps.
Gotcha. Well, coming up on the other side of the break, we continue the conversation. Youth that are affected by gun violence in the Midlands will speak with a licensed therapist, a community leader, as well as a local student to hear their perspective on what's taking place. We're back after this. Welcome back and thank you for joining us for our special edition of Watch Fox in your town hall on gun violence in the Midlands. I'm Freddie Clairvaux. Before the break, we talked with law enforcement agents and a local bishop about the violence within our community. Now, to take it a step further, we want to hear how the youth gun violence is affecting young people. Joining us now is licensed therapist and counselor Dr. Carrie Cordell, a community activist, Perry Bradley, and Kara McNair, the student body vice president at Richland Northeast High School. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. We appreciate it. Karen, we're going to start with you. What's the conversation among your peers as it deals with gun violence? What are you all saying to each other?
Sometimes there are threats. They'll play like they're like they have guns at school, and they'll be like, "I will shoot you." Like they'll use their phone and face it like it's a gun, and they will play around, run around the courtyard during lunchtime, and they'll play making the sounds like a gun, and then our administrators will stop them, and that will cause the two students are fighting, and then that will bring the administration back in and take more precaution with that. And they will get suspended, and then some students will walk around and say, "I want to kill myself." Some days, and then you can look on their face that they're depressed or they want to commit suicide. So our principal, Mr. Sims, he gave us some stickers to put on our back of our IDs, the suicide prevention line, to help out to see if the suicide prevention line will help out.
You know, speaking of helping out, this is a good segue, Dr. Carey. I mean, to hear something like that, what if your daughter or your son comes to you and say, "Mom, they're playing with a gun or threatening to shoot up the school"? As a parent, I'm a parent, I have 2 kids. How am I supposed to deal with that?
And I would first listen really carefully, right? Like, okay, so what are you hearing and what is that doing inside of you? Tell me about what you're feeling. Yeah, of course, honey, you're scared. Of course, that's really scary. Like, what are the options that we have? Let's talk through those. So absolutely, you would take those concerns very seriously. And then, you know, the schools have been really responsive about like sharing their safety plans with parents and wanting parent involvement by and large. And so if I were that parent, I would want to be involved and I would want to know what the procedures are so that I could empower my child to follow those as well.
When there was the shooting at Columbiana Mall, there was one person that one of our reporters interviewed, and the mother said that her daughter, 9-year-old, did not want to go to church on Easter Sunday or school on Monday because of the shooting. So as a parent, how am I supposed to help my child move past, I guess, the trauma?
Right, and so I would say first, don't rush it. Because like that's actually really normal, and it's normal for all of us to have like a trauma response if like we just witnessed that, right?
Yeah.
Like it's normal to not feel safe. And so instead of being like, oh, there's something wrong that you don't feel safe and that you want to avoid normal activities, I would say, I understand. Like it has been so scary when we left the house, something terrifying happened to us. Like it is terrifying. Let's feel our feelings, right? We don't want to stuff them. We want to feel them and we want to identify them because then that gives us language. And then, right, we want to be informed by the facts and be very careful about our thinking, but only after we first process the feeling. So that 9-year-old, I would validate that. And then I would say, honey, I understand. It's been really scary. And it's okay when scary things happen for us to take some time to ease back into our normal everyday life. But let's think about what it looks like to ease back into our normal day life. Do you feel like we can be brave enough today to go to church? Maybe just drive into the parking lot and walk inside for a little bit and see how that feels and then check in with each other. Because you don't want to avoid. That does create PTSD, right? When your avoidance behavior over time.
Okay.
Or after a month, after 6 weeks, re-experiencing that trauma. That's when we see PTSD. But what you're describing a week later, that's a normal trauma response. And it takes time for our brain to reorient to what is safe and when are we not safe.
Wow. Perry Bradley, community activist, you deal with this a whole lot because you're in the community talking with families, talking with parents. What is the pulse in the community as we deal with young people in violence? What are they saying? Are they afraid? Are they scared?
A lot of times they're afraid. They don't know what to do, or they're getting bad information, so they're reacting based off the information that they're getting from the streets. One of the things we like to do is actually go in and try to, one, provide real facts and real help and real identifications to what the problem is. When I spoke to Mr. McNair, just to hear him say what he said earlier, you know, our ambassador program is one of the things that will actually address stuff like that. We train our youth to become helpers and future leaders in the community. We teach them suicide training techniques so that they can identify someone that may be suffering from suicidal thoughts. We try to teach them how to work with law enforcement, bridging that gap between our communities and law enforcement. Things that we see, we try to address so that we can actually help them function better. We also team them up like with psychiatrists. We also try to find religious leaders, helping them understand that, you know, it's okay to feel the way that you feel, but it's also okay to reach out for help.
Have you ever had the opportunity to maybe speak to a young person who says that I want to carry the gun, or this is how I feel safe?
I mean, all the time. You know, one of the biggest things we've run into is I've actually helped young men who've actually gotten caught with the gun, and you try to talk to them and figure out why they carry guns. They may be afraid, they got into a fight and someone say he's gonna kill me, so I gotta protect myself. And those are the type of things that we see in our community. We have to teach them better ways to deal with anger. We have to teach them how to conflict resolution. And that's the biggest problem we're seeing right now. A lot of our young people really don't know how to deal with the feelings and emotions that they're going through.
Karen, speak to that. You know, obviously we know you can't speak for every student, but when it comes with conflict resolution, is that something that you all are seeing a lot, that everybody is just, it's on the defense all the time?
Yes, all the time. A couple of weeks back, we had almost at least 8 school fightings in 1 week. And it was like a good amount, like 5 each day. And it's normally because they want to defend themselves, because they got threatened they were going to get jumped, or, you know, they're going to get killed, like you said, or that sort of thing.
So Dr. Carey, okay, just, wow, okay. As a parent, you know, if my child comes in and says, you know, Dad, I have this gun to protect myself, or I have a weapon to protect myself, what are the steps for me to kind of de-escalate that? If they even tell me.
Right. So if my child is saying they have a gun,
yeah,
I'm going to say, give me the gun.
Right, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, you know, unarm them, first of all, because we don't want our children to have guns.
Yes.
Whatever age that is, right? And so then if they're saying, like, I don't feel safe and I need to defend myself, right? I would want to identify who are the people that you're at risk with. Like, who is it that is threatening you? What has been done so far? What has not been done so far? Have we reported this in the school? Have we reached out to the school resource officers? Because, like, they're going to take these threats really seriously, because there's been these violent attacks. Yeah. So I would want to make sure that we're going through the channels that are available first. And then I would want to, you know, empower my child to, like, understand what it looks like to be assertive without being aggressive. Right?
How does that look like?
Okay, that means, like, if you threaten me, like, right, I get bigger. I do get bigger because I'm going to project confidence. If you threaten me, I am done with this conversation and I'm done talking with you, and then I go and report it. Because, I mean, you don't know these days who is going to be like a potential perpetrator of violence and who's not. But you wouldn't want to escalate further the conflict, which would be really easy to do.
Perry, do you see a lot of escalations where it kind of leads to something that it could have been a different outcome, but it escalated because of fear, or I got to protect myself?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it deals with pride. A lot of people don't know how just to walk away or to avoid a lot of conflict. A lot of times, like what you were saying, you could just walk away, but because your pride steps in, you make you feel like, oh, they're gonna pick at me, or I feel some kind of way, I feel less of a man or a woman. But at the same time, de-escalating that issue, sometimes it is just best to walk away.
I would say getting another identity, like, other than my identity is through my power. Okay, I'm going to be the smart person in the group, right? I'm going to be the intelligent. You know what? I'm college bound. Like, whatever the adolescent identity may be that you have to adopt, so that I can have some kind of status without it having to necessarily be violence.
Okay, so carry on. Talk about that. Does it help when a lot of students show that confidence, like, you know, not me, not today, I'm not the one?
Yes, it does. It does help out. It de-escalate everything. And then that's when our administration kicks in. Okay. And then that's when they will take further to meet with both of the students, but in separate terms. Right. They will meet with the student that's causing the aggression and meet with the student that's trying to stop the aggression. And with the student that's causing the aggression, they will try to proceed with suspension or expulsion from school, or putting an order out saying they have to stay a certain amount of feet from each other.
I want to ask you a question. Going back to what Bishop Davis said earlier, one of the things he's talking about, the family structure, and a lot of youth are being taught by television, music, things of that nature. What's your response to that? And do some of you all feel that, yeah, it's not like it used to be?
From what I've been seeing around school this school term, that is the reason. It always starts at home. Whatever the parents allow, that's what we're going to bring to school. And yeah, that's what pretty much.
Wow. So Perry, parental involvement, we hear people say, oh, you didn't do nothing, Sheriff Lott, you didn't do nothing, Chief Holbrook, it's you. So where do parents come in for their accountability?
Well, if you take a child and you try to teach that child for so many hours a day, when they go home, parents can really just erase all the teaching that you just gave that child. So what we do is we try to involve the parents in what we teach the child. So with our program, what we do is we involve parents saying, hey, we teach you life skill courses. We teach you how to de-escalate issues. We teach you how to be a parent. You know, not saying they aren't parents, but sometimes they have to learn how to deal with the kids they have in their own home. Because some parents are afraid of their own children. So, you know, these are the type of things that we have to do as a group. It takes a village. It takes everyone. Like I said before, I know when I first coming up with this and I started calling around, I called Chief Holbrook, I called Sheriff Lott, I've called some of the pastors, and I told them, I said, this is my idea. And, you know, sometimes they say, hey, I don't think it's going to work. It's a lot of stuff you got to bring in together. But when you think about it, all those components are what's going to make up that person and that family, because the parents need it just as much sometimes as the kids.
Dr. Carey, going back to you with this, we're bringing it back full circle, talking about youth and gun violence, right? As a parent, what are some ways you can help them deal with the trauma? What if I'm afraid to go to school?
Right. And so, okay, that's going to depend a little bit on the child's age, right? And the child as an individual and the context that they've experienced. So if they've experienced firsthand violence or the violence of a family member or a close friend, then we're gonna look at that a little bit different than if it's more like that vicarious trauma. I've heard about it, I'm aware this stuff is going around at school, maybe I heard about what's happened at the mall, and you're gonna ask questions and you're gonna try to be that good listener, right? Like, okay, what is it that makes you feel safer? What is it that makes you feel, you know, more fearful? What are the things that you can do to regulate your nervous system? And some parents need that. And that would be another thing that I would say, that if the parent finds that they're emotionally overwhelmed by having these kind of conversations, they need to start with themselves, because otherwise they're becoming a model that the world is unsafe, everything is unsafe. I'm not okay, and I can't survive in this world, and neither can you. And so that's going to be, you know, the poor modeling, not the kind of modeling that we're hoping for. We want to be wise, right? Because there are dangerous situations and there are threats that we have to take credible, but at the same time we want to be able to recognize that most of the time traumatic things are not happening every day throughout our everyday, but it takes time to get there.
And that goes back to, once again, the Columbiana Mall. Obviously, that was a tragic incident here locally that everybody still remembers. And like I mentioned, we interviewed someone, and the 9-year-old daughter said that she didn't want to go didn't want to go to school. So if there's another parent who's watching that might be them, I know you talked about listening to how they feel. Are there more steps to take if the child is like, I don't want to leave my room? Right,
okay. And so, you know, if I don't want to leave my room, and this child has like firsthand kind of experienced that or seen that, and I, you know, again, like, I understand, honey, I would be so scared. Where do you feel those feelings? Yes, all right. So let's see if we can be brave together for just a little bit. Like, if it's a 9-year-old, right? Like, let's see if we can be brave together for a little bit. Let's leave our room and let's go outside and let's just, like, you know, do something that we used to do and see how long we can handle it, because we're going to get stronger the more that we do the avoidant thing. And we're going to get more familiar, and our brain, it goes back to what kind of I mentioned earlier, our brain will learn that this is safe, because right now everything is dangerous. That's what my brain is telling me. That's the signals that it's saying. But we need that connection with a parent or with a counselor or with another supportive individual, because neurobiologically we are wired to struggle, but we are wired to connect. And those are the connections are what get us through the struggles most often.
Perry Bradley, going back to what Dr. Carey said here, are you noticing that really from like a lot of young people that they just need somebody?
Yes, that's the whole purpose of having mentors. And that's it. They just need someone, and honestly, not to tell them what to do, but a lot of times just to listen. You know, you'll be amazed at, and tell me if I'm wrong, but just someone that can listen and hear you out, not tell you,
Right.
hey, you need to do this, you need to do that,
Right.
but more so just listen to them and see what it is that's really concerning them, so that then you are able to help fix whatever issue they may have.
Karen, another question for you. How do some students cope with what they're seeing? Do they talk with each other, or do they say, you know, I'm going to avoid this person, or I'm not going to avoid this situation?
Some students will stay to themselves and look depressed, obviously, because that's what mainly teenagers do. And some students will actually go seek help, or they'll go to their friends that they know they're in a better phase than what they are, and they'll try to seek wisdom from their friend and see if that will help. Like I have a student, she deals with that lost one of her best friends, TREVION Fuller. And she, on his birthday, not too recently, they came in the student activities room, because that's where I was, because I'm the student body vice president. And I was just sitting there getting ready for the end of the year, graduation, and getting ready for our banquet. And she just busted down crying.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, what's wrong? She was like, I miss TREVION. And I was like, okay, let's sit down and talk about this. And then she talked about it, and they talked about their memories. And then me being a God-fearing person, I just go ahead and went to praying for her.
Okay.
And then
Hey, I mean, we all need it.
right. So I went to go ahead and pray for her, and then our lead advisor, she came out, and then she was counseling her as well, because I'm guessing she got her counseling degree as well.
Okay.
So she was counseling her as well, and then that made things better. So now she's doing better in school. It was just an amount of time she was able to redeem herself with her grades, with all the stuff that's going on in school. She was able to get involved for the last couple of weeks of school. Yeah.
Okay, and that is really good to hear. With the notion of youth gun violence, it's going to be the final question before we go to break here. Some of the school districts are talking about metal detectors. As a student, how do you feel about, not that you're going to get in trouble, but how do you feel about that? Or what are you hearing from people when they say metal detectors at schools?
I'm going to go virtual.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of kids saying that they're already feeling frightened because they feel like it's going to be a prison.
Oh.
So, because the metal detector, they said they ain't going to be able to have no space for themselves. They're not going to be able to feel free anymore from school. And some of the kids are saying, I wish, let's go back to 2019 or 2018, because that was my last best year of my life. Some kids will also say, I think it's good because I like coming to school and I want to be safe.
Wow.
And some kids will be like, nah, I'm good. I think I'm gonna stay home and do virtual South Carolina.
Wow.
So a whole gamut of different things that we're hearing. Karen, thank you so much for being some type of voice for the students. We know it's not all of the Midlands, but it's good to hear a student's perspective. Dr. Carey and Perry, thank you all so very much. Of course, we are getting ready to head on over to another break. On the other side, we're going to bring back our law enforcement and also Bishop Davis. So we're going to talk about some solutions to what's happening across the Midlands. Stay with us. We're back after this. Welcome back, and thank you again for joining us for our special edition of Watch Fox, our town hall on gun violence across the Midlands. Before the break, we focused on the direct impact of violence having on our youth. We heard from a student body vice president. We also heard from a mental health doctor and also a community activist. Joining us now again is Sheriff Leon Lott, Richland County. We have Chief HOLBROOK of CPD and Bishop Eric Davis of Word of God Church and Ministries and Recreation Athletics as well. Bishop Davis, we'll start off with you for this segment here. We just heard from the student body vice president at Richland Northeast and talked about some of the concerns that some of the students are having, some saying that they won't come to school if there's any metal detectors there, stay at home. Where does the faith community step in to help people who feel afraid?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I don't think that we step in after an event happens. I think that we have to be preventive, like Sheriff said, that we expect, everything to be handled when a situation arises, but the idea is to be able to engage the community pre-crisis. I had an interesting experience because we have a church in Baltimore, and I was there immediately after the Freddie Gray riots. I came in that Thursday, I think it happened that Tuesday, and it was really alarming to see how ill-equipped the church was and disconnected from the community. And the only thing the church could think to do in the midst of that was to hold services, but you're not going to build a relationship in the midst of a crisis. You have to build that relationship pre-crisis. And we've been meeting with gang members over the past couple of weeks, Crips, Bloods, Folk, Pyru. And the interesting thing is they've been requesting us to come. Instead of asking them to go, they want us to come to the communities. Now, our church has been evangelizing a long time, but in order to create that and establish that relationship, you have to go into their territory and their turfs. As it relates to the kids, as you know, we're establishing Recreation Athletics. We've established it so that we can bring the kids to a place to give them an alternative to and a deterrent to crime. A lot of times we'll see something happen, we see those young kids on the block, but a lot of times they're in what I call dark zones where there isn't a recreational center public nearby. They don't have anything to do in that block. They're not affluent kids. They're not in affluent communities. And I think somebody on the panel just said an idle mind, you know, we like to say is a devil's workshop. So you have to do something to engage those young people to give them alternatives. And I think the church is another place because there are more churches in the community than recreational facilities. And so we have to create activities to bring these kids into, and we have to invest in our community and not just, you know, throw our critique at the problem.
Okay, speaking about throwing the critique at the problem, a lot of people talk about we see what's going on, we hear plans, but solutions.
Right.
What do you think could be some of the solutions to decrease the amount of gun violence that we're seeing across the Midlands and then ultimately the nation?
Well, again, we're going through a peace tour over the course of the summer, going into the communities. You know, I thought about it as Perry and the young man and the doctor were speaking about de-escalation. Where do people really learn de-escalation? Everything about our culture is escalation, going all the way back to Clint Eastwood, Make My Day, you know, with a 44 Magnum, and people, you know, saying, I wish you would, down to the lyrics of somebody like Lil Durk, you know, a prominent rapper. Everything is about escalation. So where do we really learn de-escalation? The young people are taught, and it's like a puppy. You can turn a puppy into a family pet, or you can turn that puppy into an attack dog. Everything about our culture turns people into attack dogs. And then when they do, culturally, what we have conditioned them to do, we then penalize them. So I think what we have to do is back up and really look across the board and not just at those perpetrators, because some of us are cultural perpetrators. We may not have pulled a trigger, we may not have, you know, been engaged in the actual act, but we contributed to the climate. And I think that we have to take personal responsibility with that, and we have to take cultural responsibility and organizational responsibility, even the media. If it bleeds, it leads. And so everything we do is about violence, and then we wonder why people are violent. So we have to do a better job about that.
And I suggest amen to that. I mean,
Okay.
seriously, he really described it accurately, the problem that we've got and also the solution to it. Conflict resolution is what's absent. We were taught that by our parents. We were taught that going to church. But our kids are not being taught that. And the church is not just the four walls on Sunday. Church has got to be out in the community, and that's what he's doing with his church, and we have other churches doing it. We just need to get more and more of that and realize that a lot of these kids don't have transportation. They can't afford to play organized sports because they've been priced out of it. It costs so much to play a sport. We got to give them somewhere to go that's positive, that's going to teach them conflict resolution and teach them what real life is about. They're missing that. And that's where they're living in this fantasy world where you address everything with a gun and with violence. And that's how we're losing these young people.
Chief, what are you seeing too as well when you're dealing with all of this? Is it the typical, like these young people are just saying, hey, it's a pride thing. Well, he did this, so I'm doing this back.
I think it's an emotional, instantaneous decision, but everybody's carrying a gun. You know, in the 397 people I said were shot over the last 5 years, the common age over those 5 years was 26, and this year, of all our people are shot, our common age is 16. it is younger people carrying guns, making split-second emotional decisions, discharging a gun, and you know, it's having catastrophic consequences. And you know, I could listen to Bishop Davis talk all day. You know, I think he gets it. His church has always played an important role in the community, and I think, you know, the one thing that we often talk about that we're missing is really that the faith community being that spoken a will that is got to be engaged. There's, you know, not only can they, you know, reach our youth in the church, you know, away from law enforcement, but I would also suggest that there is probably no better recruiter for law enforcement, and it's a hard time to be a policeman than for our church to identify people that they think have a heart for service, are from the community that they would work in, and you know, that could contribute to turning things around.
And I want to follow up with Chief Holbrook touched on this. The age is getting younger. I talked to some school superintendents today, and what we're seeing in the Midlands is the guns are in our middle schools. Before, we talked about high schools had guns. You never heard about middle schools. Our middle school students now have the guns. That's showing that age is coming down, just like Chief Holbrook talked about. The age now is down to 16 with the victims and the shooters. We're missing that younger age group and teaching them. So they're the ones who's living with violence. They're the ones living with the guns. So we got to do something about it. And you ask what some of the answer, one of them is what we're doing tonight, is we're talking about it. We can't hide from this anymore. We're losing too many kids. We cannot hide from it. We need to stop talking and let's have some action, and that's what, you know, his church is doing. That's what we're doing. But we need everybody to be part of that action, not just those who are on the set tonight and who's here. Everybody who's listening and watching this, they need to get involved. It might not be your biological kid, but it's our kids that we're losing.
You know, speaking of getting involved, we do have some people who are tuning in and listening in and have some questions. We're going to send it over to our Brian McConkey. Brian?
Yeah, Friendy, we've been asking folks to tune in tonight and submit some questions to us ahead of tonight's town hall forum. And people are watching along right now. We're streaming this live on our Facebook page, also on our website, wach.com. A lot of people commenting on the frustration we've been talking about, just angry that this is happening in our community, and expressing their condolences for the most part to all these families that have been touched by these tragic shootings, this tragic violence. David Bitter's writing on the Facebook page is there needs to be a discussion, that people are just simply angry. They reach for a gun before trying to work out the problem. We've talked about that, the conflict resolution or lack of conflict resolution. But there's also the involvement part that everyone on every one of our panels has spoken about tonight, how people can be involved. And I see a question here that kind of touches me because it's from a teacher, from an educator, and we all remember a teacher that probably touched our life and made a real difference in how we went forward. The question this teacher is asking is, how, as an educator, can I express to my students the dangers of gun use in a way that will sink in? That question coming from a geography teacher. We've kind of talked about some of those ways, but is there a way that that teacher can reach out?
Show them the pictures that are behind Brian right now. Show them, talk. Every child probably in the school knows someone has died by gun violence. Everybody was impacted in the Columbia area about what happened at Columbiana.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Tell them this is what's real life. This is not happening in California, Chicago. This is happening here in the Midlands of Columbia. This is real. Let them see and talk about what's really happening here. And then you teach them from that. Just like she teaches geography, teach them, give them the facts, and then let them see it and learn from that.
Bishop Davis.
Well, Sheriff may remember that we had a gun education session in Richmond School District 1 where I wrote a children's book, Little Ones Don't Touch the Guns. You know, I've been blessed to write 32 children's books internationally with school districts, but when we saw the uptick with a lot of children becoming younger, that are handling guns, and it wasn't just about them fatally killing or harming someone else, but also harming themselves, we felt we needed to do something to assist the schools to educate the kids, because the counselors don't have a lot of content. It's not just the teachers, it's the guidance counselors, because when a shooting happens, whether a child shoots themselves, someone gets shot, it affects the entire school, and the counselors need, as Dr. Carey would probably speak better to this, they need content, they need information. So we need to better equip our teachers. That's a tough job. As we've been working in the school systems, I would wager to say that their job may be as tough or tougher than the police officers, and they need to get more pay. We dump a lot on them and expect them to produce a lot without investing. And I think I will conclude my statement, whether it's the church, the community, families, we have to invest more in this problem. And I think that we want everybody else to solve it. We want everybody else to do it. And by investment is not always only money, it's ourselves. It's what Perry's doing. Those of us who can give more time, volunteer to school, go in and do something to mentor, we have to invest in the problem. And the greatest investment, as I said, is ourselves.
Wow, and that ties into a great transition. We have about 3 more minutes, which would open it up to you, Chief. What are some solutions, or besides this conversation we're having, what are certain things that could be put into place?
Well, we've talked about a lot of them tonight, and how important it is that it's not just a law enforcement issue. I think we have to continue to be laser focused on what we refer to as our prolific offenders. We know a very small percent of our population is inflicting a large degree, the majority of our violent crime, and we have to hold that very small, percent of the population accountable. We've got a problem, especially in this community with just the availability of handguns. We have so many guns stolen from cars. People can lock their cars. That's a gun out of somebody's hands, but we've got to hold these prolific offenders accountable. And right now there is no accountability. We have people that are repeatedly committing violent crimes, carrying guns, out on bond, wearing ankle monitors, reoffending.
Sheriff, it's actually talking about that, because we know we've heard you've made some comments before about
catch and release.
Catch and release. So what can be done? What do you think should be done to deal with that?
The whole criminal justice system needs to work together. Not just us locking them up, but keeping those in jail that need to be in jail to protect our community. It's not everybody. Just think of the thousands of kids who go to school every day who make good decisions. We don't hear about them. We don't hear about that young man sitting over as vice president of the student body. We need to also emphasize the good kids and talk about them. But the catch and release is hurting us. As Chief Holbrook said, it's a small number to commit the majority of our crimes on our shootings. It's the same ones over and over and over. We know that. We just got to keep those away from our communities.
Bishop Davis, your final statement, and we'll go to the law enforcement.
I just would say to everybody who's out there listening, let's start doing something about the problem. One of the things that we're trying to do, our ministry has invested a lot of money in creating a recreational facility that we hope this summer will reach a lot of kids. But everybody at every level can invest something to resolve the issue. And let's just stop talking about it and let's do something to change our culture.
Chief?
I would say we're coming into a long, hot summer. We have not seen a positive trend so far this year. We have got to have our neighbors, as the sheriff often speaks of, to be nosy neighbors. Tell us when something isn't right. We've got to intervene on the front end and break some of these cycles and do what we can to educate and prevent and keep our youth busy this summer.
Sheriff?
The bishop said it just meant it's not about money. It's about love and caring. Our community's got to care. If we don't care and start really doing something, we're going to continue to lose too many young people, and that's a tragedy. But we can do something about it if we all work together. That's where the village comes in.
Sheriff Leon Lott with Richland County Sheriff's Department, thank you for being here tonight with us. Chief Holbrook with the Columbia Police Department, thank you. Bishop Eric Warren Davis of Word of God Church and Ministries, thank you. We also know Perry Bradley, community activist, who is still in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Carey Kudell, thank you so much for your mental health expertise and help. And also Carrie Ann McNair, student body vice president over at Richland Northeast High School. Thank you all for joining us. And once again, this is definitely a discussion organization that needs to continue to keep on going on, like you all mentioned, investing your time, being there for the community, and speaking up when you see something. So once again, thank you all so much for joining us for this special on the Midlands, here on our violence across the Midlands. Now, we have a photo gallery of young lives lost to gun violence on our website at WACH.com. If you would like to submit photos of your loved ones, we encourage you to send us a message on Facebook or email us at news@watch.com. These are just some of the pictures right here. You're taking a look. And the 6-year-old who just tragically died on this weekend in Orangeburg County, playing in his house. You're taking a look here at a 14-year-old who passed away, another young lady there who passed away, this other young lady who passed away in downtown Columbia. We're taking a look at another student athlete, another young lady. All these lives gone too soon, all because of gun violence. Once again, everyone who's at their home or watching us on air or online, we want to thank you so much for tuning in to this special here on Watch Fox. We say goodbye with a last look at some of the young lives that have been lost in the Midlands. Thank you for watching and have a good night.